Many Christians today live trapped in a constant feeling of false guilt, convinced that they are committing serious sin, even when the Bible itself never classified certain attitudes as sin. This silent fear grows within the church, fueled by traditions, religious cultures, and even religious leaders who, without realizing it, created rules that God never created. Jesus spoke directly about this when he denounced heavy burdens placed on people's shoulders, burdens he never planned for you to carry. Today, I will reveal 7 dangerous lies that make Christians feel guilty, trapped, and spiritually suffocated. Some will surprise you, others may free deep areas of your life. But the last one is the most destructive because it causes people to hide their faith in silence. And that is exactly why you need to stay until the end. If you believe this kind of truth needs to be spoken, then like the video and subscribe. You help us spread messages that many are afraid to expose. And tell me in the comments which city you are watching from. There is a deeply rooted belief in many American churches that seeking medical help demonstrates a lack of faith. For some, going to the doctor, taking medication, or seeking psychological treatment sounds almost like a silent confession that God is not enough. This idea did not come from nowhere. It has been fueled over decades by faith-healing movements, messages that promised instant miracles, and a spirituality that associated physical suffering with proof of holiness. The problem is that this mindset produced something dangerous. Christians who feel guilty for taking care of their own health. People who pray, who believe, but who feel spiritually inferior for needing a doctor. However, when we look at the scriptures honestly, this guilt simply does not hold up. Jesus himself presents himself as a physician when he says, in the Gospel of Luke chapter 5 verse 31, that those who are well do not need a doctor, but those who are sick. If medicine were a sign of unbelief, why would Christ himself use this image to explain his mission? Even more, in the parable of the Good Samaritan recorded in Luke chapter 10, we see an injured man being treated with oil and wine, therapeutic resources commonly used at the time. Jesus not only tells this story but uses it as an example of true love. And when the Apostle Paul writes to Timothy, in the first letter to Timothy chapter 5 verse 23, he explicitly recommends the use of a medicinal resource to treat physical problems. Paul, a man used by God in extraordinary miracles, saw no contradiction at all between faith and treatment. This reveals something liberating. God works both through the supernatural and through natural means. Medicine does not compete with faith. It preserves the life that God has given. And perhaps the uncomfortable question is this: who benefits when Christians feel guilty for taking care of their own bodies? If this point has already confronted something you learned your entire life, write the word health in the comments. But guilt does not stop at the body. It also infiltrates emotions. There is a very strong culture, especially in American churches, of forced positivity. An environment where sadness, anxiety, and depression are seen as spiritual failures, where smiling becomes almost a silent commandment, and any sign of emotional pain is interpreted as a lack of faith. The result is devastating. Christians learn to hide what they feel, to pretend strength, to silence tears. However, the Bible presents a completely different picture of spiritual life. The prophet Elijah, after one of the greatest spiritual victories of his life, enters such a deep state of despair that he asks for his own death, as recorded in the first book of Kings chapter 19 verse 4. God does not rebuke him for this. God feeds him, allows him to sleep, and treats him with care. David, called a man after God's own heart, records painful questions in the Psalms, such as in Psalm 42 verse 5, when he asks why his soul is downcast. And the strongest example of all comes from Jesus himself. In the Garden of Gethsemane, according to the Gospel of Matthew chapter 26 verse 38, Jesus declares that his soul is deeply sorrowful, even to death. Luke describes that his sweat became like drops of blood. So great was the emotional suffering. If feeling pain were sin, Christ himself would have sinned. The truth is simple and liberating. Feeling pain is not losing faith. Pain is part of the human experience in a broken world. God never demanded artificial joy, but sincerity before him. When the church condemns human emotions, it pushes people into isolation and silence. And prolonged silence kills from the inside. This same distorted logic appears when the subject is planning. Many Christians grew up hearing that planning too much demonstrates a lack of trust in God. Phrases like, "if God wills," began to be used not as an expression of humility, but as an excuse for the absence of responsibility. However, the Bible never presents faith as the enemy of wisdom. On the contrary, the book of Proverbs chapter 21 verse 5 states that the plans of the diligent lead to abundance. Jesus himself teaches about planning when he speaks of someone who wants to build a tower and first sits down to calculate the cost. According to Luke chapter 14 verses 28 through 30, Jesus does not criticize this behavior. He praises it as wisdom. And perhaps the most powerful example is Joseph in Egypt. In Genesis chapter 41, Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dream and spends 7 years planning, storing resources, and organizing the economy to face the famine that was coming. God does not accuse him of lacking faith. God uses planning to save entire nations. Planning with humility is not pride, it is stewardship. Especially in a context like the American one, where decisions about career, finances, and family shape generations. Planning is responsibly managing what God has entrusted. If this confronts the idea that spirituality and organization do not walk together, write the word plan in the comments. Guilt also shows up when the subject is money. Many Christians were taught to believe that prosperity and spirituality cannot coexist, that material comfort is a sign of worldliness. This mistake is born from confusion between wealth and idolatry. The Bible never states that owning possessions is sin. What it condemns is loving money above God. Abraham was extremely wealthy according to Genesis chapter 13 verse 2. Job is described as the richest man of the East. David accumulated great wealth, and Solomon was the most prosperous king of his time, as recorded in the first book of Kings chapter 10. None of them were condemned for this. The text of the first letter to Timothy chapter 6 verse 10 does not say that money is the root of all evil, but that the love of money is a root of many evils. That difference changes everything. When churches teach that poverty is a sign of holiness, they often create systems of control, keeping believers emotionally and financially dependent. God does not condemn prosperity. He condemns corrupted hearts. And when Christians understand this, they are freed to be generous without guilt, prosperous without shame, and responsible without fear. Another silent burden rests on the minds of many believers: the idea that doubt invalidates faith. There is a culture of perfect faith where questioning is seen as spiritual weakness, but the Bible presents a much more honest faith. Gideon asks God for clear signs in Judges chapter 6. John the Baptist, the same one who announced the Messiah, sends messengers asking whether Jesus truly was the one who was to come. According to Matthew chapter 11 verse 3, Thomas declares that he would only believe after seeing the marks on Jesus' hands according to John chapter 20 verse 25. None of them are rejected for this. God does not reject those who ask questions. He rejects those who pretend. Honest doubt can strengthen faith. Forced silence is what destroys it. If you have ever felt guilty for questioning, write the word doubt in the comments. The culture of exhaustion has also been spiritualized. Many Christians live worn out believing that this glorifies God. But Jesus did not glorify exhaustion. He confronted it. In Mark chapter 6 verse 31, Jesus invites his disciples to withdraw and rest. God himself establishes the principle of rest from creation. The Sabbath was not created as punishment, but as protection. Limits are not weakness, they are wisdom. Constant exhaustion is not a sign of zeal. It is a sign of disobedience to human limits. Spiritual, family, and emotional health require pauses. And this brings us to an even more sensitive point: boundaries in relationships. Many Christians believe that Christian love means tolerating abuse, manipulation, and disrespect. But Jesus established clear boundaries. He withdrew when people tried to use him. Proverbs teaches discernment in choosing companions. Stepping away from abuse is not a lack of forgiveness. It is protection of the heart. Boundaries do not prevent love. They make it healthy. And it is exactly here that many Christians lose themselves, believing that enduring everything is a sign of holiness, when in truth, they are only hurting themselves in silence. After walking through all these truths, it becomes clear that much of the weight so many Christians carry did not come from God, but from human interpretations that drifted away from the heart of the gospel. Jesus never called anyone to live imprisoned by guilt, fear, or shame. On the contrary, he called people to the truth that sets free, to a living faith, conscious and rooted in the Word. When we understand what truly is sin and what never was, something inside us realigns with God. Faith stops being a burden and becomes relationship again. If, at any point in this video, you felt that God spoke directly to you, that something was touched in your heart, or that weights began to fall, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and leave a like now. This is not just support for the channel, it is a way of saying, I want more of the truth of the Word. And if you made it to the end, write in the comments, I love the Bible. In the next video that is already appearing on your screen, we will dive into 5 powerful Psalms that you need to read before starting a new day and overcoming spiritual attacks. This next message may be exactly what you need for tomorrow. I will see you there.